Alright, so in this video, I'm going to show you how to calculate the percent recovery from the Excedrin. So I'm just going to give you an example and then give you some information to set you on your way. So I'm not going to do the math for you, but I'm going to do a sample math problem. So let us say you had a compound like a mixture of compounds like you have in a drug like Excedrin. So let's call this drug my last name, Bromfield. So let's say you have a prescription that's called Bromfield. Within Bromfield, you have 3 other drugs. So we're going to call this A, we're going to call this drug B, compound B, and we're going to call this C. And they're in different amounts. So let's say in this drug, I have one pill is, let's say, 500 milligrams. And of that pill, and let's assume there's no fillers or any nonsense, just kind of like your Excedrin where there's not really anything. And let's say 300 milligrams of that is A, 150 milligrams of that is B, and C is 50 milligrams. So that will give us a total of 500 milligrams. Bless you, sorry. Excuse me. And let's say in the lab you're doing, let's do the example of your column chromatography. And let's say you were trying to separate these 3 things just like you did aspirin, caffeine, and acetaminophen. So in Excedrin is those 3 things like we know. And we separated and you got your, set up your column and you measured out, let's call it 0.180 grams for your column. And then, so this is the total of Bromfields. And let's say of each of the components, we want to figure out what is the percent of each one of those in Bromfield. So the way to start this is first, we're going to use this information to know what's the percentage that should be in there. So it doesn't matter whether I have 500 milligrams or I have 0.18, the percentage should be the same. It doesn't change. All that changes in the percentage doesn't change. All that matters is the exact amount. So to do this, and I have my calculator out because I can't do this in my head. So for compound A, you have 300 milligrams, and you want to figure out what percentage of your sample is A. So take the 300 milligrams divided by 100%. Divided by 500 times 100%. So 300 divided by 500, and that gives us 60%. So 60%, I should have been able to do that in my head. I don't know why I was thinking I couldn't. And then B, again, you take 150 over 500 milligrams, and so the milligrams cancel times 100%. And so that should be 30%. And then C, we're going to take 50 milligrams over 500 milligrams times 100%. And that's going to give us 10%. So what that tells you in any mixture, so all your mixtures, 60% is A, B is 30%, C is that. So let me give you an example. So in 1 tablet of Excedrin, all right, so you're going to apply in 1 tablet of Excedrin. Excedrin has in 1 tablet 250 milligrams of aspirin, 250 milligrams of acetaminophen, and 65 milligrams of caffeine. Therefore, there in one tablet, there is 565 milligrams total. So very similar to this, to figure out your percentage of aspirin, for instance, you would say the percentage of aspirin is 250 milligrams divided by 565 milligrams times 100%, and you do that with all of those, and that will tell you, so you can calculate the percentage of Excedrin there is. So it doesn't really matter how much you start with, the percentage doesn't change. So let's go back to my original example. So in terms of running my column, or when I did recrystallization, so I'll talk about that in just a second. In terms of the recrystallization, the idea is for your column chromatography, that A is still 60%, B is still 30%, and C is still 10%. The percentage doesn't change because that's standard. So what total mass should the A be? So to figure out what is the mass of A, you would say 60% of the total, so 60%, so that's 60 over 100, times the total mass should give me what my A should be. So if I take 0.18 times 60%, my total mass of A should be 0.108 grams. And so we would apply the same thing here. So for instance, when you did your column chromatography, you know what is the mass you measured out of the Excedrin. So you can figure out what percentage of aspirin, caffeine, acetaminophen, because you take that mass and multiply it by the percentage, and that's how you get that. So we'll do the same thing for B. You would take the 0.180 grams times 30%. And again, it should all add up to the total mass when you're done. So 0.054 grams, and then C 0.180 grams times 10% should be 0.018 grams. So that tells you how much. So you would apply that same concept to Excedrin. Now with the recrystallization, it's a little bit different because we only have 2%. We only have 2 compounds. So I'm gonna tell you what percentage, what is that mixture. So I actually didn't give you Excedrin. You got a mixture of the components from Excedrin. So I'm gonna give you some of that information. So in the case of all the unknowns, whether you have A or B, there were only 2 compounds in there. So you need to figure out what those 2 compounds are. So let's say for A, you had your 2 compounds. Let's call it A1 and A2. So I'm not going to tell you which one is which, because remember, they're unknowns and you have to decide what was originally in it. So the thing that was the material that you collected in the end, whether it be aspirin, caffeine, acetaminophen, and let's say it was caffeine, right? Because some of you had caffeine. It was the majority. So whatever you collected in the end was actually the majority. And how the solutions were made is there was a total of 55 grams that were made, and your majority was 50 of those grams. So how much you had of your so 50 divided by, so the majority, the thing that you should have gotten back was about 90.909, so 90.91%. And so the minor thing is the rest of it. So whether you had A or B, the majority of your sample was 90.9%. So What that means is if you had weighed out exactly 300 milligrams, you should have recovered 90% of that. So you should have recovered at least, in a perfect world, 2.2727 grams. So if you didn't recover about that much of your sample, that's what you actually should have recovered. So what you actually might have recovered is whatever mass you measured out in the end divided by 0.2727 grams. Because remember, for our recrystallization lab, only 90.9090990% of it was actually the majority you should have got, whether it's caffeine, aspirin, acetaminophen, and the minor should have been like 9.1% of your sample. I'm sorry, I'm a little congested. So I hope this helps a little bit. If we don't quite understand this, just let me know.